What's up, YouTube? We are continuing our series, if you're new to POE, where we are walking through some of the different types of currency that is available in POE. Last video, you can see it also on the playlist down below. Last video, we walked through some of the most basic currencies in Path of Exile, including your Scroll of Wisdom, Portal Scrolls, Blacksmith Stone, Armor Improvement, Glassblower's Bauble, GCPs, Gem Cutter Prism, as well as Cartographer's Chisel, Orb of Transmutation, Augmentation, Orb of Chance, as well as Chaos Orb, and as well as Orb of Alchemy and the Regal Orb. Path of Exile has got a bunch of different currency that is all used for crafting. Path of Exile doesn't have gold or it's simply a monetary value that drops from monsters, but instead it's got currency that drops from monsters that is used for crafting. So today we're going to wrap up as we chat about some of the other basics that are needed for crafting gear. So we last left off talking about Regals, Alchemies, and Chaos Orbs, and how you can change a normal item into a rare item. Now we're going to talk about what you can do if you want an item to have a specific number of sockets on it, or a specific number of links. So if you've got orbs of jeweler orbs, then what you can do is you can roll those jeweler orbs to increase or change the number of sockets on an item. So let's take a look right here at the Oblivion Wrap Colonial Leather. This is what we were working on in our last video, and we look at it, we say, hey, this is let's pretend that this is the item that we want it to be. It's got the stats that we want it to be, but it doesn't have the number of sockets that we want it to have. So we're simply going to take a jeweler's orb, and we're going to say we want this to have at least 5 sockets, and we're going to keep using jeweler's orbs until we get to 5 sockets. That's our goal. That's what we're aiming for. It can sometimes take a lot of sockets. It can sometimes take a lot of jeweler's orbs to get the right number of sockets, because it's a low chance. Every time you're using a jeweler's orb, you're essentially rolling dice and hoping that you're going to get the desired outcomes. There we go. We finally got a 5-socketed item. Now, if you notice, looking at the Oblivion Wrap, you notice here we've got 4 green colored sockets and 1 blue colored socket. As we're looking here, you can look and see the Chromatic Orb. The Chromatic Orb is used to reforge the color of sockets on a particular item. So let's say, for instance, we're using a gem setup that requires 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 green. This would almost be perfect, but it doesn't have a red gem on it. It doesn't have a red gem socket. So we're going to use chromatics until we get 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 green. Now you'll notice every time we're using a chromatic orb, we are again rolling the dice, hoping that we get the colors that we want. Different items have different bases, and they roll or have different preferences on their rolls as you're using them. There we go. We finally got 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 green. Items that have got evasion as a base or dexterity as a base, you can actually look at your character sheet right here, the 3 different main stats in the game: intelligence, strength, and dexterity. Items are all based off of this and have requirements that you meet in order to use certain items. So a lot of the times these are called stat thresholds for you to be able to use a particular item. So if an item has a stat threshold that is based off of dexterity, then its preference will be green sockets. You'll notice that each of these stats are color-coded. Dexterity is color-coded green. So that means that if you're rolling an item that has dexterity as a color requirement, it is going to prefer, when you're rolling the chromatics for rolling colors on the item, it is going to prefer to roll greens. That's why as we were flipping through and using chromatics on it, so many greens appeared. It's not truly a random number. There's a weighting to it. If, however, the item requires you to have a certain level of intelligence, then it's going to prefer blue colored sockets. And lastly, if it's a strength-based item, it is going to require, it is going to favor red-based sockets. So we can see here that our Oblivion Wrap is an evasion-based defensive item. Evasion is based off of dexterity. You'll notice that it says requires level and then also requires a certain amount of dex. So it's a dexterity based item, which means it's going to favor green. That's why green keeps coming up so often as we roll chromatics onto it. And it's also why blue and red, when they show up rather rarely, and they don't show up taking up all of the slots because the item still prefers to roll green. All right. Lastly is going to be our Vaal item. So let's say, or a Vaal orb. So let's say we've got the perfect number of sockets on here and the perfect links. I don't have any fusings right now to show you, but an orb of fusing lets you re-roll the links in between gem sockets. So in order for gems to interact properly together, you need to have them linked. It's not enough simply to have sockets in the gem. They also need to be linked. So that's what those little tiny links are that are in between our blue to green and our green to green. But notice that red to blue is not linked and red to yellow is not linked, which means right now this is called a 3-link item. It's not a fully 5-linked item. But let's pretend for a moment that this is the item in its perfect state and exactly what we would want. You can use a Vaal orb on it. So Vaal orbs corrupt an item, which means that you can't do any more crafting on it. You can't scour it to reset it back to a normal item. You can't use transmutation to move it from a white item to a blue item. You can't use an alchemy to use it from a white item to a yellow item. You can't use a regal to go from blue to yellow. You can't use chaos orbs on it to re-roll it. You can't use jewelers on it to re-roll the sockets. You can't use fusings on it to re-roll the links. A Vaal orb makes an item corrupted. Now, sometimes corruptions can be worth a lot because they can add a whole other stat line to it, such as +1 maximum frenzy charges. That's often a very highly valuable Vaal orb corruption. Sometimes the item can brick, which means that the item simply resets or is no longer worth what you thought it was worth. It can totally brick the item because it changes its stats unpredictably. Or it can reset colors of a particular gem or of a particular item to white colors. So we're going to use a Vaal orb on a couple of different items and see what it does. So first off, here we go on our leather. And it says that we've corrupted it. And take a look. It looks like didn't really do much. It simply corrupted it and it changed some of its stat line. Let's go ahead and take a look at another item. Here was our rapier that we were playing around with earlier. Let's go ahead and corrupt this, see what happens. All right, that one corrupted and it changed the color socket. Notice that used to be a different color socket. Now it's a white socket. White sockets mean that any gem of any color can go in there. So you can use a blue gem, an intelligence-based gem, a red gem, a strength-based gem, or a green gem, which is really, really great. Tabula rasas are some of the most highly desired leveling uniques because they have 6 linked 6-socket chess piece that are all white sockets, which means you can socket it and support any sort of gems that you'd like inside that. So very, very highly valuable when you get multiple white sockets on an item. It gives you a lot of flexibility as you build. So there you go. We're going to continue with this series, and hopefully this is all helping you. If you've got comments or questions down below on learning how to play Path of Exile, leave us a comment down below and we'll continue to pump out awesome videos that hopefully walk you through what it's like getting to know and learning some of the ins and outs of Path of Exile.